Luke 15, 1 to 6. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep.'" Luke 15, 25 to 32. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found."
For many agonizing weeks, two cousins from Kitchener, Liam and Amanda, were forced to keep this major secret. And they wanted to shout it from the rooftops. They were that excited. But their showbiz contracts forbade them from divulging the identities of their big-name co-stars in a brand new Disney movie that's going to be coming out. Well, finally, a couple weeks ago, Disney bigwigs have given Liam and Amanda permission, the green light, to reveal their huge secret. They've been dancing in a movie with teeny bopper heartthrobs, the Jonas Brothers. Now, when I read that article, I felt like I could empathize with Liam and Amanda, because for weeks now, I felt like I've got this secret that I've just wanted to shout from the rooftops, but I couldn't do it because it would wreck the series that we're in right now. Because as far as I'm concerned, the entire series that we've been in on this parable has been building up to this Sunday. And I would say that today is the highlight or the climax of the series. But I had to keep everything under wraps until now and just build up step by step and detail by detail without giving everything away until today. Bit of review before we go there, though. Last week we made this radical discovery, and that's this: that there is not just one way to be spiritually lost, but two. There are two ways to be spiritually lost. And Jesus expertly illustrates these two ways in his famous parable of the prodigal son, which Pam just read portions of. The younger son in this parable represents the first way to be lost, which you can call maybe the way of licentiousness, or in English, modern common English, basically be as bad as you want to be, right? And that's not news for us. We're aware of that. It's common knowledge. The Bible teaches, and really all the major world religions adhere to this teaching that wrongdoers and quote-unquote sinners, bad people, wind up in hell. That's the first way to be spiritually lost. But the older brother in this parable represents a second way. And that I'll just call the way of moralistic self-righteousness. Self-righteousness. Basically, being as good as you can possibly be. And this was news to us. In fact, there was an audible gasp here last Sunday as I was teaching on this. And people were like, "What? How can really, really good people wind up in hell?" It's a good question, isn't it? And the answer, of course, is this. Really, really good people wind up in hell for the sin of seeking to be their own Savior and their own Lord. To truly become gospel Christians, we need to admit that we've ultimately put our trust and our hope in things other than God. And that in both our wrongdoing and our right doing, we've been trying to control God in order to get the blessings of God. And that's why when Jesus asked, or when Nicodemus asked Jesus, what happens when you become a gospel Christian? The image that Jesus used was of new birth. He said, it is not unlike being born a second time. It's that radical. It's that radical. Well, that was our big discovery last week, but really that just takes us to the brink of Jesus' message. It just takes us to the message of what we need to be turning away from and not what we need to or who we need to be turning to. And that'll be today's discovery. We're going to turn from licentiousness and we're going to turn from moralistic self-righteousness. There's a third way, the gospel way. And that's what we're going to discover this morning. I want to begin by asking those of you who have been coming out to this series a question. What did it cost to bring the younger son home? What did it cost? I think at first glance, it doesn't appear to have cost anything, right? He comes home and the father greets him at the end of the property. In fact, the father runs out to him, embraces him in his arms, and there's no punishment. There's no punishment for dishonoring the father or the family. There's no punishment for wasting and gambling away his inheritance. There's no punishment for sleeping with prostitutes and so forth. The father just gives him a hug, essentially, and says, that's it. It's free. At first glance, then, this parable seems to support an idea that's very popular in our Canadian culture. This is a real Canadian idea. And you guys, some of you might hold to this. It's certainly common in your workplaces and so forth. And that's this, that God, if He indeed exists, can forgive anyone who asks. Right? God's God. He can forgive anyone who asks. There doesn't need to be a penalty for sin. There doesn't need to be a payment for sin. And if that's the case, there doesn't need to be Jesus, right? You can be saved in other ways other than Jesus Christ. That's a popular idea today. You just have to ask God. That's it. It's free. And the people who hold to this view, they'll even look at this parable in Luke chapter 15 and they'll say, see, the Bible even supports this. God the Father in heaven is like the Father in the parable, and He just accepts and forgives anybody who asks. There's no need for the classic Christian doctrine or teaching of the atonement. There's no payment that's required for sin. With God, reconciliation of a relationship and salvation, it's completely free and without cost. But this is a terrible mistake. The reconciliation that was free to the younger son came at a great cost to someone else in the story. The older brother is furious when the father receives the younger brother back into the family. He alludes to this in the passage Pam read. He says, you never even gave me as much as a young goat to celebrate with my friends. And this son of yours comes home and you kill the fattened calf for him? The older brother is angry because he knows the cost of reconciliation. I mean, remember when the younger brother left, he asked his father for his share of the inheritance. And he goes to a far-off country. And what does he do with that inheritance? Does he invest it? Does he put it in a bank? No, he blows it. It is all gone. There's nothing left. And yet now the father is restoring him back into the family. He's already put a robe on him, the best robe of the house. He's put sandals on his feet. He's given him the signet ring or the family ring, which would have enabled him to have the authority to sign family contracts again. He's going to kill the fattened calf for him. The younger brother's fair share of the wealth, the inheritance, is all gone. But now he's back, and every robe and sandal and ring and fattened calf is at the cost of someone else.